Hello,
Hello.
everyone. How we doing? How we doing? Welcome to the Bitcoin Developers channel. I'm your host, Connor. Every week, I take some of the smartest minds from the Bitcoin developer community, and they teach us something that can help us become a better Bitcoin developer. Today, I've got my friend Gloria here with me. How are you doing, Gloria?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for
Yeah,
having
I'm good.
me.
No problem. Thank you for everyone who's in the chat. We've got quite a lively chat going on already. Just looking excited. Yeah, so am I. You guys are great inspiration. Appreciate it. Thanks for your kind words already. So yeah, today we're gonna get down to some nitty-gritty stuff. We're gonna learn how to review a Bitcoin Core pull request. Yeah. Um, Before we get into that, maybe Gloria, if you want to give like the people a little bit of a background on yourself, like how did you get into Bitcoin development? How long have you been doing Bitcoin development? And why you chose to kind of start developing in this space?
Okay. So I Bitcoin Core at Brink, which is a nonprofit for funding research and development in the Bitcoin space. Um, I got into Bitcoin Core mostly through Chaincode. So Chaincode Labs is a company in New York that is for Bitcoin research and development, and they do a lot of educational programs. So I got in touch with Adam Jonas there, and he put me in touch with John Newberry and Amity Utawar, who were like my mentors to start with. They both worked on Bitcoin Core, and then kind of like showed me the ropes, and I started, like hanging out on the repo and reviewing PRs and writing a couple. And then John started Brink about a year and a half ago, and invited me to be a fellow. So the fellowship program is a program on my Brink where, in addition to like being funded to work on Bitcoin full time, you get mentorship. So I highly recommend it. Learned a lot. And yeah, that's me. And that's Martin, who's the other fellow. So
Awesome, awesome.
yeah.
Um, okay, cool. And like if the people wanna like follow you and kind of keep an eye on some of the work you're doing, I think you're on Twitter. Can people kind of find you on Twitter
Yes.
and GitHub, yeah?
Yes, that's me. I'm
Okay.
Gozao, GLOCOW.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. So, do you want to should we just kind of dive right in with reviewing Bitcoin Core pull request? Maybe to start, maybe a little bit of context. We're gonna. So I guess yeah. In fact, let's just dive straight in. Let's we can dive
Mm,
straight in. So you're gonna guide me through the appropriate steps to to start reviewing. So where do we start?
yeah. So I guess we start straight from the beginning. You have a GitHub account, yes?
Mhm. I do, yeah.
So if you go to github.com/Bitcoin/Bitcoin, that is the repository for Bitcoin Core, which is oh,
If I spell it properly.
sorry, did I?
No, it's
Oh,
okay.
okay. I thought I gave you the wrong link.
No,
Okay.
there's gonna be plenty of
Um,
that this session, so you're gonna have to get
okay.
used to it.
Cool. So what you're gonna want to have you already forked it? Do you have your own
Yeah, so
fork
I
of
actually already have
Bitcoin Core?
Bitcoin core set
Okay,
up and
cool.
compiled and stuff like that already. So what we can do is we'll go through that process anyway of cloning and forking and all of that stuff anyway,
Cool.
but maybe we won't do the whole compiling and stuff like that, but just to give people a feel of like what that would actually look like. So
Right. So why don't you click on code and grab the link to, yeah, that one.
mhm. And then
Oh,
I'll
that's
open
the
a
SSH link. Maybe grab the HTTPS. Either way will
um
work, but
yeah, I mean I've got my SSH key set up
okay, cool.
anyway, so it's not a problem.
Cool.
So let me switch windows here to my terminal. Let's see how we do this. So, okay, cool. So we can put this in any folder we want. I'm just going to put this in the root for now. So if we get clone, and what are we doing here? Are we kind of just like downloading a copy of what's hosted on GitHub to our local machine, basically, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
getting a local copy of the Git repository with the code and all of the history.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Cool.
this is how
And
you
like
should get
anyone
your
can
Bitcoin
literally,
code.
yeah,
Yeah.
and like any
Yeah.
literally anyone can do this, right? Like as long, well, technically you don't really even need a GitHub account, do you? Or is that like the easiest way someone would get access to the code?
Yeah, you don't even need a GitHub account, but it should be easy enough
Yeah.
to set up.
Yeah.
It's free. Yeah. So CD into Bitcoin.
Cool.
Cool. And
Um.
then I know that you already have the dependencies installed. So
Mhm.
all you have to do is do autogen.h and configure autogen.h .sh, sorry. Yeah.
Autogen.sh, and to run it, I think we need to do that, right? So what is happening here? Autogen is auto generating what exactly?
So this is just doing magic essentially. It's
This is just compiling all
so
of the
since
things, yeah.
you're on a Linux-based machine, so it uses auto tools as part of the build system. So it's just grabbing from your like environment, like the environment variables and like seeing what you have installed and
Mm-hmm.
all those things. And then now you run configure.
So configure.sh
Configure. Yeah.
as well.
No .sh. Just configure.
Okay. So yeah, someone else
Yeah.
said in the chat that you don't have to clone it via SSH if you don't have like your key set up. Hey,
Yeah.
you can just use HTTPS as well, and that will work fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so yeah, since you already have all your dependencies there, if you didn't, then right now the configure script would complain and whatnot.
And
Yes, so
and so we're
it's
just using
creating the
like,
make file.
yeah, so we're just using the default configuration script that's set up, but is it
Mhm.
true that you can configure it with different options, right?
Yeah, so you could say I don't want the GUI, or you could
Yeah.
say I want you to use a different version of BDB or something,
Hmm.
and that will modify. I think it modifies the make file.
Hmm.
Actually, I might be incorrect on that one, but
Someone
it'll
in the chat knows,
change
let us know.
what's going to happen when you ask for your build target. Yeah.
Okay.
So now you can just run. Oh, actually, I said that I was planning to add some developer productivity tips in this.
Okay.
So the first thing is I know you have Zcash installed,
Okay.
but maybe
And
just put in brew install Zcash.
what is Zcash?
Sorry. It's a compiler cache. So
Hmm.
I think one thing that I noticed really early on when I was trying to start out in Bitcoin Core is it takes a long time to compile things.
Hmm.
There's just a lot of files. And the compiler cache essentially makes it such that you don't have to recompile things that you already have. So, like if you're just
Hmm.
editing a test file or something in RPC, you don't have to recompile like all of mempool and all of
Got you.
like coins.h and transaction.h. Cool. So you
Got you.
already have that. And then
Yeah.
the other tip that I wanted to put in, can you run nproc to see how many processes you could?
So mproc,
Oh, okay.
okay, I don't.
Uh,
So what is mproc? So this is a tool to allow you to
how many
see
processes
process
you can have?
processes are running. Okay. So
Um,
I
I
don't have this.
think
Is this something
processes.
available in Brew? Homebrew?
It's just something you can also go if you're on a Mac, you can just go to like about or something to see how many
Okay,
I
give
don't
me
know
a
if it's
second
threads
here.
or processes.
Let's
Um,
see.
okay. can look it up as
So
well.
yeah, so let's see if let's see if it's on Homebrew, and I can download it from there. If not,
Okay.
um,
Linux
let's
manage
see.
number of processing units.
While
Let's see.
while that's happening, so you can obviously compile core in different environments as well. And if you are on a Mac, let me just switch over to the browser to show where you might find the instructions to compile from source on a Mac very quickly. So I'm gonna have to swap over again here. Forgive me, and share the browser again. Okay, so if you're on a Mac operating system, there are build instructions directly in the Bitcoin repo as well. So like, to not bore you guys too much of just running commands, like a lot of this stuff was done pre to this stream. But if you head over to the repo, there's instructions on how to build for Mac OS and Linux environment and Windows as well, I believe.
Okay.
Let's see.
Yeah.
Okay, so nproc. Just going back to nproc.
So you can also use sysctl, sysctl. I think it's.
Okay, here we go. Okay, we're in the chat, so someone's got actually. Okay.
Yeah, essentially, this is just a long-winded way of me saying you can use the -j command for make to make your compilation multi-threaded.
Okay, let's do that so people can actually see it. Where's my terminal? Okay, here we go. Okay, sysctl is the equivalent to nproc on macOS. All right, cool. So if I do sysctl, sysctl -n hw dot is.
Ooh, do we want physical or do we want logical? Whatever. It's whatever.
Should we give it a try and hope it doesn't blow up my and hope it doesn't blow up my screen? Okay, so this tells me
you have at least 8.
Yeah.
So you can run make -j.
-j. Yeah.
I think you can put 9, but maybe just put 8.
So make -j and then 9.
Yeah. And then so this took longer than I thought it would, but essentially I wanted to say, if you are new to Bitcoin Core and you're finding it taking frustrating amount of time to like figure out if your thing is compiling, the 2 things that I would recommend is getting Zcash and using your threads if you have a multi-threaded computer. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's it.
Okay, cool. So can we stop this and dive into?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Just Control-C it.
All right. So I'm gonna go into my projects folder and cd into Bitcoin. Okay. So at this point, we've basically like compiled everything for our operating system, and like, are we ready to kind of run? What should we do at this point? Should we like try and run tests? Should we just run the daemon straight away? Like, what would you recommend?
Yeah. So if this is your first time, I would recommend running the test. So you can run the unit and you can run the unit tests and the benchmarking tests with make check. So that's a build target that says both like the binaries and run the tests. And you can run the functional tests using test/functional/test_runner.py. And that'll run all of the functional tests.
Okay.
Yeah. So as you can see, you don't have, what is this? Oh, you don't have Bitcoin D compiled. So it just ran the subtree tests, I think, is what just happened.
Okay.
I think that's what happened. But pretend you had like libbitcoin server like compiled and then it would run everything. So that's what I would recommend if you had time. And then if you go into the source folder, you don't have it compiled, but
No,
it
I
would
think
produce
I
a
should do.
Bitcoin
So
D.
let's see.
Okay.
No, I should have it compiled. Let's see. So we have, okay, so let's just look at the directory a little bit as well, just to get familiar with what's going on. So maybe I open this actually in my code editor at this point. Yeah, let's do that. Let's switch over to VS Code. Give me a second here. Yeah, let's switch over to the IDE at this point. Okay, so we've got a long list of files and folders in here, like just a very quick maybe like overview of like some of the stuff that's going on here. So we have like a source directory, which
that's where all the
is
code
where,
is.
yeah, that's where most of the code is, and this is where like we can compile, and the result is where these are where the binaries and executables live, right?
It's where the source code lives, and
Yeah,
the executables will, once you've built them, they'll be there as well in the source
yeah,
folder.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so we just ran some tests, and they passed. Where do we go from here?
Okay, so we wanted to review a PR, right? So like if you had built everything, you could run your own Bitcoin node using the executable that you built here.
All right, so
And
let's just go back and
also,
double. Let's just for my sanity, let's just go back and double check that. So I haven't built it. I haven't built everything, right? So you're saying I haven't.
no, you
I don't.
haven't.
Okay, so what do I do to do that? What do I have to do to do that?
Well, that would be make. And
Just make.
so, yeah, make is like build all build targets, including Bitcoin D. And
Cool.
the way make works is it'll build everything that is needed to build your final build target. But yeah, in
Okay,
the
so
end, you end up with your executable.
so I'm getting this making all in source test dash test underscore Bitcoin. What does that mean?
Uh,
And I'm
can you
assuming
run?
if I try and if I try and build now, it's probably going to take a while. Hence why I kind of did it before. I think I did it before anyway.
Did you clone it before as well? And it's because I think the folder that you're in right now is the one that you just cloned at the start of the live stream. So if you built it in a different folder, it'll probably be over there.
Let me just double check that. So no, I'm in my projects folder where I cloned it previous to the stream. So I think that's fine.
Okay.
So if we look in the source folder, we
Okay.
should have like
Bitcoin
access
D.
to like the Bitcoin CLI and
Yeah, it's right there.
Bitcoin
Yes.
D. So we have CLI, we have Bitcoin D.
Yes, cool. Okay. So maybe right now we can run a node.
Okay.
So if you have the terminal, just run source/Bitcoin D. Probably don't put daemon because we want to see the output.
So just before I run it, so what are we doing here? We're actually basically spinning up
You're
an
starting a node.
instance of core. We're starting a node now, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, right. We ran into this before too.
Yeah. So let me. What I need to do is if I go back to terminal. Yeah, we had problems with this before, didn't we? When I was trying to uh, run it from the cloned version that I have, but when I run it from this, let me go back to the terminal. So essentially, you should be able to just like run Bitcoin D from anywhere and it start, but that's not the case here. Okay.
I think you'd have to add it to your
To my
path
delete.
variable.
Okay, hold on. No. ZHRC. Okay. So I think I might need to add this to my path variable, right?
So wherever your projects folder is, like projects/Bitcoin/source, needs to be another place where path is going to look for executables.
Okay, I'm going to open this in VS Code and do it there instead. So the joys of live coding. Got the Python to start with. Let's take a little breather and read some of the comments. Is there any sort of mock like Bitcoin node, i.e. Ethereum development? There's Ganache, Truffle, Hard Hat. Do you want to maybe take a stab at answering that?
Mock like Bitcoin node. Like for development purposes. Okay, I guess I'm not really sure what the question is. You can, I guess, because then I'm not sure what the question is. Because if you're
So like,
asking
is there like,
if you can test a node,
are there like hosted versions of like Bitcoin nodes that you can just like get access to, like maybe set up an account somewhere and like you can just like play around with like a Bitcoin node? Is there stuff like that?
Oh.
Or do most developers just like try and do it
I
what we're
feel
doing
like the
now and
easiest.
just like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that hard to just compile. Like we just did it in the last 20 minutes. It's just to compile a Bitcoin node and run it in like regtest mode, for example. And or like run it on testnet and then interact with it using Bitcoin CLI. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, give me a second.
So something like a local node that you don't sync to the current block. Yeah. So in regtest mode, if you look in the functional tests, for example, what they do is they spin up Bitcoin nodes in regtest mode. So they have like most of them, they'll start with a blockchain of like 200 blocks. And there's no proof of work requirement in regtest mode, obviously. So you can like mine blocks on demand and like see what happens if you broadcast these blocks or these transactions. And then you can call the RPC interface on each node that you've spun up and whatnot.
Okay. I'm still trying to run the daemon here, but I'm getting command not found in my terminal. So I think I've exported the binaries here. So I've got a path to home, projects, Bitcoin, source. Let's see here.
If you type which Bitcoin D, what happens?
Okay, so Bitcoin not found.
Okay.
That's annoying. Literally. So the file that we're trying to execute is this one here. Where are we?
Bitcoin D. Well, so maybe you could click. Is there also a Bitcoin QT in there?
Bitcoin QT.
Oh, I don't see it. That must have been.
No, this was happening yesterday or the other day when we were together as well, where like the Bitcoin D file just disappears when you try to compile it, right? So let's Should we try and do autogen
Yeah, so
again?
maybe try source/bitcoind and then put in dash help and see what happens.
Okay, what am I in now? Source.
Oh.
Okay, source dash Bitcoin D. Okay, hold on.
What happens if you run make?
So let's just see what's going on in the chat. So we've got people saying
got
do
it.
echo. If I echo path. So we've got my name, projects, Bitcoin source, user, local bin, blah 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 blah.
So path is edited.
Okay, so
try source/bitcoind again.
So this is weird. So it's saying 9563 killed, and then like the Bitcoin D
it just
file
crashed.
just crashes. All right, so let's try this. Let's try this. Let's try and make.
That's never happened to me before. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. We'll work it out. That's what we're all here to kind of work it out together. So.
It's also not necessary for us to do this to review a PR. So if we want to move on to what we had promised in the marketing, that's also an option.
Yeah. That's really weird because I was literally testing. I was literally running it in regtest mode earlier, so I'm a bit unsure why that's happening. Let me. Just trying to see if any of these comments are helpful. Could it be invoked manually by running dash Bitcoin D in front of the executable? Let's try that.
Yeah, so that's what we were doing, but
that's pretty much what we did, right? So if we cd into source, oh yeah, because it keeps deleting it for some reason. That's very weird.
I'm very surprised that that's happening.
And then if we try and do that again.
Yeah, I mean, we can just move on because like this was just like, oh yeah, you can run a node if you do this, but since it's not working, we might as well.
We failed at that. So let's try. We'll see if we're successful at the next bit. Okay, so we actually want to like pull a branch from that to test, right? So okay.
So I think before this, we picked out a PR for review. So if you go to the GitHub, you go back to the GitHub repository.
Okay.
Let's see.
Cool. So
we wanted.
So just quickly, like a pull request. What is a pull request for anyone who
it's a request for someone with write access to pull your code changes into the master branch, which is, I guess, why it's called a pull request. What it is a proposed code change. That's it. And right now there are 371 proposed code changes to the Bitcoin Core repository, which means need help for people to review them. So we're going to try to make a dent in that today. So I think what we wanted to do was 23319. So maybe if you just go to the address bar and you edit the URL. So delete the S.
I think I might have it.
Oh, you've got it.
I think. Here we go. To this one here.
Yeah.
Okay. Is this the right one?
Cool.
So yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah. So maybe this is like you requested this feature, or you would be able to use this feature in your application or as a user. And
Mhm.
so you want to help push forward this change. And so I picked this one because it's got a little bit of C++, but it's mostly Python, so it should be pretty accessible to a beginner. And it's not going to be like consensus changing potentially if we get it wrong. So I thought we just look at this one. And essentially what it's doing is it's returning more information from a RPC. And the RPC is one of the interfaces that is exposed by a Bitcoin Core node. And so you can use this RPC to query your node and ask about some transaction that's either in your mempool or in a block that your node has downloaded.
Okay. I'm just reading the comments as well as you talk. Okay, so one interesting way or tool I found that you can use to test out like RPC methods is this what would we call this, like RPC browser. Let's see here. So this gives you basically a list, right, of all of the different RPC methods that are available, categorized by different areas of the code, I guess, like blockchain, mining stuff, networking stuff, transaction-based stuff, and more wallet-based stuff. The one we're interested in is called Get Raw Transaction. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So
I would recommend using the Bitcoin Core developer docs.
Okay. So is that
Which is essentially the same, and this is great that this resource exists.
Okay.
I would just add, that's what I would recommend is
Okay,
go
cool.
closer to the source.
Okay, that's a good
yeah,
that's a good
and you have it
adjustment.
open.
Okay. So that's what we're looking at here, yeah?
Yeah,
Cool.
so the one we're looking for is raw transactions, I think. Oh, you already have fun raw? No, we're looking for.
So you want get. I've never actually used this site before. So raw transactions.
Yeah.
Raw trans. How do I find? Do you just search it in the toolbar? Get raw transactions.
Yeah, or you can click on raw. Oh yeah. No, that's not it. If you click on the raw transactions,
here we go.
Yeah, it's right there.
Okay, cool. And then it gives you some information on like the parameters, I guess, this RPC takes. So it takes a string, a transaction ID, and some optional parameters. So verbose, I'm assuming if you just want like well, let's read it. Let me not assume. So arguments, transaction ID, which is a string. So you pass it a transaction ID, or you can optionally pass it this verbose flag, which gives you a JSON object. Okay, cool. There's no way for us to see it from these docs, though, is there?
So if you had a Bitcoin node running, you could use Bitcoin CLI.
Okay, I'm gonna be cheeky and just use this anyway and grab a transaction ID from like a block explorer. Let's see how this works.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just grab one of these transaction IDs, go back, copy it in. We'll do verbose true because we want to see what's going on, and then just execute it. So having run that command, gives us back this JSON looking object with stuff.
Yeah.
So it gives us back the transaction ID, a hash of which is this, I guess, the same thing, a hash of the transaction. How big it is, I guess, the stuff around virtual
Yeah. So the first would be
size.
raw bytes, I think, and the second is virtual size.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Virtual in, or like virtual in, vector in, represents like one UTXO, I guess.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So
similarly,
this
like,
is just a decode of
yeah,
the transaction object.
cool.
And then
Okay,
maybe
cool.
we go back to the PR.
hmm Okay, so that's just like a look at what it kind of does currently, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm. And then so the PR is saying, okay, why don't we have it return even more information,
Got
such
you.
as the fee, which is pretty nice to know.
Okay, and is this like the proposed what it would look like in the CLI with that change? So,
Yeah, so the Bitcoin CLI actually talks to your node through the RPC interface.
hmm
Um, and I think this is an example call.
yeah, I'm just thinking. So yeah, so if you was to call it directly from the CLI, you pass in this transaction ID,
Yeah, this is an example
and it,
call. So he's passing in two, or they.
so yeah, there. I guess the proposal is to change this verbose flag to, instead of being a boolean, to take an integer from
Mhm.
0 to 2, um, where
Yeah.
each integer like outputs something slightly different depending on what one you pass in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just
Okay.
more information, more
Yeah, just more
verbose.
information. Okay.
Yeah. And then the hash afterward is a block hash, just in case you have your node is able to, or no. So if your node,
Okay, this
it
is
tells your
PR.
node, like, here's a hint of which block it's in.
Just a few people asking questions in the chat. Is PR? Okay, so already been answered. 23319.
Yeah.
Um. Okay, cool. So like when you arrive here, like obviously you read the description, you try and find out a
Mhm.
bit more context about what is happening, and then like there's people that have already left comments on it already. So like there's a lot of concept acts going on here.
Mm-hmm.
What is act?
Acknowledge. It's like I
Okay.
agree. Typically, what I would do is actually not look at the conversation very much
Okay.
because I
Okay.
don't
Okay.
want my mind to be spoiled. Like if I look
Yeah.
at something and like Marco's acted and I'm like, all right, sounds good then. Um,
Okay.
but what I would want to do is like formulate my own opinion, right? Okay, but back to your question
Okay.
about the hacking. Um, so I think that leads pretty nicely into probably how I would suggest approaching review. So typically you would go in steps. Like first you ask, is the concept good or not? Like, do we want information? Like, do we want fee information returned from RPCs for like a legacy? Sorry, not a legacy, a historical transaction in the blockchain.
hmm
Yes, I think it's a good idea. And then your next step would be like, okay, like what the approach? Okay, sorry. So once you decide this is a good idea, it's a good concept, then you might
hmm
concept act it. And then you're like, okay, this is a good idea. How would I implement it? And then usually I would think about how I would implement it and then compare
hmm
it with how the author has implemented it. And then if I
hmm
think that they have like a very poor performance solution or like their thing is like 5,000 lines of code when you could just call a helper function and it would give it to you, then
hmm
maybe that's an approach knack. But otherwise, if it's an elegant, performant, safe solution
hmm
that, doesn't conflict with other projects and, doesn't introduce security holes, whatever, then you might approach Ackit.
hmm
And then you look into something deeper, like you look at the C++.
hmm
There's no like call after free. They're not like they're not writing unsafe code. Essentially, you look at the
Okay.
tests. The test coverage is good. Blah blah blah. Then you might act the top commit hash, which you're agreeing to the code changes as is.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
so
That
those are the
makes sense.
kinds of three things I would break it down into.
Okay.
Um, yeah, one thing that maybe this is just my personal opinion.
hmm
But if something is in draft, for example, or like
hmm
there's still a BIP that's being reviewed. You might not want to go onto the PR and be like, hey, you spelled this wrong, or like,
So there's a bit of etiquette required
leaving
here.
nits. Yeah. So I think it's a good practice for how you might spend your time reviewing a PR, but also kind of like if you're looking at where the PR is, like what stage the PR itself is it in, that might also inform you about how what things you should be looking for example.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And if you go into, I think, contributing.md, it also mentions stuff about concept and approach act and whatnot. And this is, again, this is my own interpretation of how review flow goes. Other people might have different ways that they go about reviewing PRs. But that's, I think, usually how Bitcoin Core PRs go is people review it, they ack it, and then a maintainer thinks, okay, this has been reviewed thoroughly. Now I merge it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, this section down here
Right.
around like peer review. Okay, got you.
Yes.
Cool. Recommended reading.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. And then this is at this stage when we're like, we've just started looking at a PR. I might also suggest looking at the PR Review Club. So
I think one thing we
Bitcoin Core.reviews.
Before you go there, I think you mentioned it, but we haven't actually looked at like what. So I don't know. You actually said you're in your process. You wouldn't actually look at. Would you look much about what's changed in the files before you decide? Yes. Okay, you would at least look at what's changed first before you decide.
I look at the code first, and then I look at the conversation.
Yeah, got you. So if people want to see what's actually changed, they just click on this files change tab, and it gives them a view of the current state of the code versus the proposed changes, basically.
Yeah. And then like very early on, this might also be a good time for like we have it cloned, so we can check out this branch. And I would start building it while I'm reading the code changes and like thinking about it conceptually. Because it takes a while to build sometimes.
Do we want to try that while you start talking about some of the Bitcoin Core PR Review Club stuff?
Yeah. So definitely, if you're going to review a PR, definitely you should be grabbing it locally and building it and testing it.
I'm gonna try it and do it like the quick way. Well, I say the quick way, but I'm gonna try and do it this way. But because I think I've got the GitHub CLI installed, but based on how I started this stream, I don't know. So let's
you could also git fetch origin / no, it would be origin space pull / 23319 / head.
Let's go back to VS Code and see what's going on here. So I'm currently on master. I'm on the master branch.
Yeah, so HR, you came late. I mentioned Zcash as like the first thing.
Yeah. Nice to have you here. So what am I doing? I'm trying to pull this branch now.
Basic repository, Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. So yeah, it looks like I've pulled that branch now. So I'm on that branch.
Great. So now what I would do is I would run make check, and there's only one commit, but what I would also do is do a interactive rebase on latest master, and then do exec make check and test runner. So what that would do?
Let's slow that down a little bit. So make check is compiling from source again and running a test.
Yes.
And then you mentioned an interactive rebase on master. Is the purpose of that to just make sure you're up to date with the latest changes before you start testing stuff, before you start playing around?
So what that does is it looks for silent merge conflicts. So GitHub, I think, will automatically show you if you have merge conflicts on your PR, and then the author would need to rebase it. But you can also have silent merge conflicts. So for example, this is changing get raw transaction. And if there was another PR that was not quite touching the exact same lines, but like changing the way, like changing what get raw transaction is going to return, for example, or changing what is returned from the mempool if you're querying the mempool for a transaction. And that isn't like a line, that's not like a diff conflict, but it's like a logical conflict because now this branch doesn't actually build, or like it returns the wrong result, for example. GitHub wouldn't be able to, or Git wouldn't be able to detect that. But what you do what I do, at least when I'm reviewing a PR, is I'll rebase on my current master and make sure there's no silent merge conflicts. And I just think it's a good practice.
Okay, got you.
For reviewing.
Just a couple of stuff in the chat. Is this GitHub's GHCLI? Yeah, I use GHCLI just because I had it installed and it was just quickly easy to copy and paste. But you can just use regular Git to check out. I think the command is like git fetch origin pull branch number,
so you would
pull request number, and then head branch name, something like that. So. Oh, here we go. Yeah, here we go.
Yeah. Or you can add that person as remote and check out their branch. That's also a way to do it. That's how I did it at first. And then now I have an alias to just fetch everything, all the PRs. I can post that later.
And and someone asked, is VS Code a good GUI for PR reviews, or better to use Shell plus Vim plus Git? Yeah, like because I don't have the skill set to use Vim and things of that nature. I tend to just stay in VS Code to like prevent me having to switch between ID and terminal. But you definitely don't have to do that. It's just and for the live stream purposes as well, so we don't have to keep changing between. But yeah, usually most people will have a separate terminal next to their code editor. So this is taking quite a while. Do we know how long?
It'll take a long time.
It will take a long time. Okay. When you say long time, like what? Like half an hour, 45 minutes? Like.
Well, so I don't know how many threads you said it could use. I have no idea how long it's gonna, because you've also got a camera on your computer. So I'm not sure.
Okay, cool. All right. And then
either way, so yeah, usually I do this first when I am going to review PR, and then I'll go back to the browser. So maybe we can we can spend some time looking at other things, and then maybe when we come back, we'll have it compiled. So would now be a good time to mention PR Review Club?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so if you go to bitcoincore.reviews, I see you have a tab open too. Right there.
I've got too many. Is it this one?
Cool.
Oh, that was lucky, wasn't it? Wow.
So coincidence. We've actually done a PR Review Club on this PR. And so if you don't mind, I'm going to shill PR Review Club now.
Shill.
So I help coordinate Bitcoin Core PR Review Club, which is a weekly meeting that we do on Wednesdays at 17 UTC on IRC. And basically every week there is a host that picks a Bitcoin Core PR. And actually we're doing a LibSecP PR in a couple weeks. and just write some notes on like some background or context that might be helpful to a beginner for reviewing this PR, and some questions. And throughout the meeting, all we're doing is discussing these questions. So if you're a beginner, it's supposed to be very, very beginner friendly. So if you have quote unquote dumb questions, there's no such thing as a dumb question. If you have basic questions, that's a really great place to ask them. And then, yeah, like if you prepare ahead of time, usually you get a lot more out of the meeting because, yeah, MCs have learned so much for PR Review Club. And I have too. So basically, when I was a beginner, I just made it a goal to like attend every week and like try to say something, like try to answer one of the questions or like all the questions, for example. And this is a really great way to learn both the code base and to start to get a sense of like how review works and build a mental model around like what you should be looking out for when you're looking at PRs. So a lot of the times the questions will be like, oh, like what does this function do? Or like it'll prod you to manually test it or explore the code path that gets to this change that's being hit. Or it'll ask about like, oh, like, did you think about any potential vulnerabilities that like this might cause? Or like, did you think about alternative approaches that might have different like performance and whatnot? Yeah, and it'll give you tips for like, okay, like, can you add a log statement that will tell you like what the fee is of this transaction as we're building it at this moment? Or like, did you use PDB to like figure out like what happens when these nodes are talking to each other, or whatever it is. It's a great club and you should join. And
One
we
thing I
have
didn't
lots of fun
realize,
every Wednesday.
one thing I only realized this week is that the meeting's text only. I had no,
Yes.
I had no idea. So it takes place in IRC. Did you just mention that? I think
Yeah.
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 So
It's on IRC.
it's on IRC. So this is just like a chat client, yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I do wonder if video could make more sense, but what like some of the big advantages is you can share code. And like it's not just the host like talking the whole time. I'm like 1,000% sure that maybe not 1,000%. I'm like 99% sure that if it was a video meeting, it would just be the host being like blah blah blah. Here's the PR, blah blah blah. But we have done a video one before. So Larry, who's in the chat right now, I think he hosted like the one video meeting that we've ever done in PR Review Club, where he walked us through how he uses GDB to debug his Bitcoin Core code, and that was cool. And I'm not saying there was anything wrong with it, but it was him talking most of the time because that's just what happens. And he was teaching us, which is great. But I think the PR Review Club is supposed to be a bit more back and forthy because it's supposed to be for beginners.
Okay. Just to pause there, a couple of questions. Yeah, I was going to bring that up. So I couldn't understand your move, your move to the PR over the master branch tip before starting reviewing. Can you repeat the benefits of that?
Okay, yeah. So what I do is I rebase the PR on current master because that's what would more or less happen when it's merged. And I use that to look for silent merge conflicts.
Should we try and do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So
let me switch back again.
Hopefully that was clear to whoever asked the question. I can elaborate more if needed, but I also did. Yeah.
So should I kill this? It's still building. Should I kill it and then
Yeah, you can kill it.
I think I should probably kill it.
Yeah. So this is why I wanted to express in the beginning for productivity. You'll want multi-threaded and you want Zcash.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe we can do a
Great.
little in the future, do a segment just on those two things and actually get it working. So
Yeah. So maybe type git rebase.
by the way, I love the format. Don't change it. Appreciate it. So git rebase
Dash I.
dash I for interactive, I guess.
And then head tilde 1. Yeah. So this PR is only one commit. So this is not as relevant for this PR. But if the PR was like n commits, then I would add a break in between each one to recompile and rerun the tests. But yeah, essentially just pretend there's multiple commits. You would add exec make -j blah blah blah.
Between each one. So like, hold on. So to walk me through this. So the first one is like, obviously that, like you said, there's only one commit, and that's this one, which has got pick, and then the commit hash, and then the message of what this commit is doing. So if there were multiple in between each of these like pick commands, you'd do a make check.
Yeah.
To make sure what is the purpose of doing like the make check in between each one?
So that's to ensure that each of the commits works, or it's like commit hygiene. So let's say there was a bug in this PR, and it needed to be reverted. If each commit works by itself, or like if each commit compiles, then you only need to revert the change that broke Bitcoin.
So does it literally look like so the first one's pick, and then you do like
it would be exec.
Check. Oh, sorry, exec, and then make check, blah 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 blah, and then the second one pick some commit hash, and then like exec make check. That's like it'd be like that basically. Okay, got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that makes sense. And that's, what did you call that? You called that commit hygiene or something. What's the term you
used? Commit hygiene.
Okay. Okay, cool. And what if there's like a shitload? What if there's like 50, 100 commits? Like would you still do that, or?
Yeah. Well, so usually we don't have more than 20 or 30 commits for a PR. Like most of them are less than 10, I would say.
Okay. Yeah.
And then sometimes like if it's only touching the functional test, for example, then you don't need to recompile. Yeah. You can run it overnight if you want.
Okay. Got you. So hopefully that answered, just going back into that, answered that viewer's question in a bit more detail. Cool. All right. So yeah, we were talking about Bitcoin Core Review Club. Did you kind of finish with that, or was there anything else you kind of want to add?
Yeah. Okay. So if there was already a review club on something, you can look at the logs. We always post the logs within a week after. And if it's like an upcoming one, then maybe you can look at the notes. Either way, like the notes and questions should help. Is all I want to say. It's
the logs. Where would one find the? Oh, okay, just here. Like,
it's right there.
There's a meeting log. Yeah. Okay, I get you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. I was finding that very interesting that it was text only. That was it's pretty cool. Okay. Cool. Where are we heading? Cool. Where are we heading now?
All right. So now let's pretend like we read the notes and the questions. We think it's a good idea. And now we want to look at the code.
on GitHub or just locally?
I would do it locally because you've checked it out.
Okay.
And this is also where the interactive rebase would come in handy because I would recommend reviewing it commit by commit. That's kind of why it would have multiple commits, I think. So that, well, partially so you can introduce it in steps, but also like it helps reviewers look at small amounts at a time.
We've got about 20-25 minutes to go, so let's see what we can
Cool.
squeeze in here.
Great. So let's see. How do you prefer to review diffs?
That's a good question. How do you prefer to review?
So okay, so if you go to terminal,
yeah.
First of all, you can do git show. And that will show you the diff. But yeah, so that's one way to do it.
So this is one way to do it. There's also like if you're more of a GUI type person, you can like install a
diff viewer.
A Git client like I think GitHub Desktop or something like that. If you wanted like a more of a GUI type thing, but if you want just command line, then Git show is one option.
Yeah. And then git show, you can also put in commands to help display the diff in a more helpful way. So for example, if there's a commit that's mostly just moving stuff, you can say git diff color moved dimmed zebra, for example, and then like everything where it's just
yeah. And I was going to say, so when we're looking at in this view, like green represents just like additions and
added lines.
When we see added lines, additions, and then when we see lines that are red followed by like green, they're lines that have been changed basically. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. And then so another thing is like this might only be helpful if you're already familiar with these functions because it pretty much only shows you the chunks that have changed. So maybe press Q to quit out of that, and then do git log -- stat. Cool, and then Q. And so this just shows you which files were changed. So maybe we can go to source rpc client.cpp because you have VS Code. We can just open up these files and like.
What was the file name again? It was
source rpc.
RPC
/ raw transaction.
Oh no! If you just give me the file name, I think VS Code should be able to pick it up.
Oh, okay. Raw transaction.cpp.
Okay, there we go.
Cool. And then grep for get raw transaction.
Okay, I'm gonna do get some better syntax highlighting. I probably shouldn't have done that live, but
it's okay.
We'll soon find out. Okay, so while that's giving me some extensions that give me better syntax highlighting. No, we're not gonna do all this now.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. Configure project. No. Okay. Cool. All right. So this is the file where the changes are taking place. Cool.
Yeah. So Control F, get raw transaction.
Okay.
Great. Yeah, it's right there. So if you are new to get raw transaction, this would be a really nice this would be the right thing to do, is just like look at the function as a whole and see
Mm-hmm.
what it does. Another thing is you could look on Doxygen, which I think it was really
Oh,
helpful for me in the beginning.
yeah, I do want to
Right.
pause and look at that actually because that I found that
Yeah.
quite
Yeah. Let's
useful.
do that.
Doxygen. Let's have a look at that.
Yeah.
What?
So if you're someone who's like new
Doxygen.
to the Bitcoin Core code base,
Yeah.
and it's just like this giant thing that like you don't know where anything is, and you're trying to figure
Okay,
out
here
what
we go.
calls what. Yeah, there we go. We have Doxygen,
Mm-hmm.
which is a website that essentially like analyzes the code and will
Mm-hmm.
like generate graphs like this. And it'll also display the Doxygen comments, like the inline comments on the function headers and members and classes and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you can just like search in Doxygen, get raw transaction, and it'll show you, like this is showing you get raw
I'm
transaction is
seeing.
going to call all these functions to like whatnot. It's just, this is probably a more helpful uh like visualization if you're trying to learn like code paths and the architecture of the code base, like
Mm.
from the in the beginning.
This basically shows how
um
everything's like interlinked from the starting
yeah,
point of this function at least. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think it'll show caller and callee graphs. So for example, if you're looking at transaction validation,
Mm-hmm.
which is I spent a lot of time trying to figure that out. I
Mm-hmm.
spent some time on Doxygen just being like, okay, what calls what? Like, what is the process of validating a transaction? Like,
Okay.
And then my other piece of advice would be to get a very good grepper. Um, like in
So
VS
this
Code,
is this
there's
just like
a
this? I'm
search
assuming
tab.
this is just is this part of like the source code in core as well, or is this someone has done this separately and just auto generated all of this stuff?
Uh, so it is auto generated,
Yeah.
but I'm
Okay.
not really
So.
sure who hosts it. I,
Oh, okay.
I think Bitcoin Core does. I don't know.
Okay. Maybe that's a question for the
Maybe
people to
someone
find
else
out.
knows.
Yeah. 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 No problem. Cool. Okay. Do you want to head back to code
Yeah.
edit? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
How are
Cool.
we getting on in the chat? Are we enjoying ourselves so far? Not got long to go. If you've got any questions, feel
People are
free
pretty
to.
excited about Doxygen, I think.
Yeah, yeah. When you sent that to me, I was like, oh wow, like I pretty much needed this the whole time I was at university. But there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so I don't know if we're gonna have time to like go through the functions and grok it.
Hmm.
Um, but
Let's pretend we did,
I
or
I've
let's do a
given all
little
my
bit of grokking.
tips.
Let's do
Yeah,
let's do a little bit and then
cool.
pretend we did the rest.
Yeah. Um, so this is where like having a big monitor might help. So I'll have the diff in one,
Mm.
like, so I'll use tmux and vim. So I'll have
Hmm.
one panel with the diff showing, and then I'll have my place to explore the code. So for example, here we were adding the verbosity thing, right? So
Hmm.
on line 140, we see, oh, okay, verbosity, verbose. This code has been introduced by the author of this PR.
Hmm.
And maybe right now, I'll like read the doc string to see if it's, or the help string to see if it's helpful. Um,
Yeah. So
and then,
originally it was verbose was just a Boolean flag, and
yeah,
this is saying what?
yeah.
So the help string says it's gonna now take a number, um, and
Mm-hmm.
the default argument is going to be 0. When you pass in 0, um, you get returned back the hex encoded version of the transaction. If you pass in a 1, you get the JSON object, and 2 if you want the JSON object plus fee and previous outputs.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
do we,
So
this is maybe a bit more deeper down, but how do we know like that doesn't break anything? That is like a good a good strategy for this change. Like, how do we start thinking about that?
yeah. So the way I would have thought about it was like, I look at the concept and I'm like, okay, how would I implement it? So to return the fee, you need to, you need to look up the transaction itself, of course. And then fee is inputs minus outputs. So what you're going to need to do is you're going to look up those previous outputs, to see the amount. You sum that up and then you subtract the sum of the output amounts from it to get the fee. So then you're like, okay, maybe you don't already, maybe if you're a beginner, you don't know exactly like what code that looks like. But you're like, okay, that's what my approach would be. And then you scroll down. So this is just like the help man part. So if you just scroll down,
So 1 second. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, you scroll down a bit more, should be like, yeah, this is just
Keep going. Keep going.
yeah. Yeah, so now you get to the callable that actually handles the request. And this is the code that implements get raw transaction. So the first part, like from 249 to 256, is all new code to do verbosity rather than just a Boolean verbose.
Okay, here, around here. Okay.
Yeah.
I've never done C++ in my life, so forgive everyone in the chat, forgive me. But yeah, I guess just like reading through, it's doing some like error. I guess it's doing like some error checks to start with, right? It's just checking like if the parameter that's passed in is null, checking if it's a boolean, like, and then setting that value here, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so a lot of like
And
checks and a lot of assignments going on here.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're new to C++, which I was when I first started looking at Bitcoin Core as well, I would recommend just like allocating an hour per week learning C++, like pure C++, or that's my style of learning. Maybe not everyone likes reading from textbooks, or like maybe your 1 hour is allocated for like making little toy programs and like seeing what happens when you change a pointer to a reference, for example. But there's like loads of really helpful books and resources. And if you just do like 1 hour a week, that's all you need. Oh, what resources did I use? So Bjarne Strusup, who made C++, has, oh, I have the book right here, actually. There's this, which is C++ 11 reference. We have 17 in Bitcoin Core, but this is helpful because it has like standard library and whatnot. But if you don't want to read that, he has a tour of C++, which I found really helpful. It's like this thick, and he just kind of goes through the like memory model and then like just very brief chapters on like copy versus move, references, smart pointers, the containers available from the standard library. And that kind of like gives you a tour of everything that you might need to know in C++. And then whatever you find really interesting, you can go and buy another book. I'm currently reading this nice guy on concurrency. But yeah, and then like once you've kind of brushed up on the basics, then you should be able to read code, and then whatever you
Mhm.
feel like you're missing, you just go for that. If I'm going to recommend another book, I would recommend Effective Modern C++.
Mhm.
So that one is kind of like a recipe book, or it's like organized in tips almost, where it's like use auto when you can, or like when to use braced initialization versus parentheses initialization. And it's like 2 pages per tip. So you could read like one a day, right before bed or first thing in the morning. That one's Effective Modern C++. Sorry. And it's got a little peacock on the front. So yeah, those are my favorites. A Tour of C++ and Effective Modern C++.
Very cool. All right, cool. So just going into the last 10 minutes here. So let's say
Yeah.
I've kind of grokked this now and I kind of understand what's going on. I've been going hard with the C++ and I can read this like line for line, and I'm ready to kind of make some suggestions, or I
Mm-hmm.
think it's all good to go, and like I'd be happy with this being merged. Like what would be my
Mm-hmm.
next kind of step?
Yeah. So then I guess you would go to the pull request on GitHub
Mm-hmm.
in your web browser.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So let's go back to it here. Yeah,
So if
okay,
you go
here.
on the commits tab,
This one here.
yeah. And then you go on, you just click on the commit. And if there's multiple commits, then it'll have like
Mm-hmm.
previous and next. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like you'd be able to make comments here. So if you click on the plus there, yeah, like you can write like,
I won't make a
um,
comment because I have no right to make a comment. But like, well, we can have a look at someone's comment, right? Just as an
yeah,
example. Um,
yeah, you
that
just
might be
pretend
good.
you wrote a comment,
But that's how
and then
you
you
would do
click
it.
on, yeah.
So there's people that have left like.
So
So this is an example of a comment, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
So
you
you might
could
say
like
like,
comment.
oh,
You
this
could.
comment
Mhm.
doesn't match what the code is doing, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
Uh,
Cool. And these are all examples of comments, and um, this is probably for another day. But like generally speaking, like when you're commenting on someone else's work, you should like obviously try and be, and like we spoke about a little bit
polite.
earlier, like just be respectful, and all of all of that good stuff. Um, and try and be as objective as possible, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. You always want to be constructive and respectful.
Okay.
Yes, I agree.
Um,
Cool.
so
So,
there's a comment side of things, and then there's also like all right, I don't really, either I've left comments and they've been addressed, or I don't have any comments and this
mm,
all looks good to go to me. What does this looks good to go to me scenario look at?
so then you would ack it. So today we let's just pretend we like
Mm-hmm.
reviewed everything. I think
So
today
we
we
got
would
some
probably go
access.
as
So
far
we
as
so
leaving the
we'd
concept
literally,
doc.
yeah. So we'd write literally like something similar to this concept,
Yeah.
or exactly this
Yeah.
concept. Like, okay.
Yeah. And if you feel that it's perfect and ready for merge, then you ack the commit hash.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
yeah.
And
So
so
when
you
we were in
wouldn't
the
just like
commits section.
you
Hmm?
wouldn't just like you wouldn't just like review changes and like approve and just there's a more of an like a
Oh,
nuanced way to do it, or like.
right. This is, I think, maybe more unique to Bitcoin Core.
Hmm.
So first of all, we don't trust GitHub because sometimes it doesn't display what's actually there.
Hmm.
But the problem with approved changes is your approval will persist through a force push. So you could approve these changes and GitHub would be like, oh, you approved it. And then the author could force push and they'd be like, oh, rebase, but actually also slip in like a bug or something.
Okay.
And then your approval would still be there. So
I
I
see.
think we tend to avoid using the GitHub interface.
I see. Got you.
Yeah.
And
That's,
I see there's like all of these checks that are happening when a
mm,
pull request gets pushed. Like what is there's a lot of checks and ticks and like some things failing and merges
right. So
being
this
blocked.
is
So like
our, yeah. So that's our CI. We have a bunch of different builds. Bitcoin Core is supposed to run on a number of different architectures. So like some of this is like Windows native, some of it is like cross built. Um, so there's like a linter that runs. Um, some of it, yeah, that's like no wallet. Some
yeah.
some PRs need a Geeks build as well. Um, and so I think there's one check failing. Um, and so you could actually go into details and like see what's going on there. And if we had time, then
Yeah.
maybe we can go on IRC into the Bitcoin Core Dev chat and ask for a rerun of this because I checked it late. I checked it earlier, and let's say like, oh, this is because of some bug that was in master that has since been fixed. You could have it rerun either by force pushing again or just having someone with access rerun it for you. So that would
Okay.
be another reason to go onto IRC and do that.
So one good thing to know is after a force push, you can click on the force push text. It's a
Mm,
link, even though it doesn't look like it, and you can see exactly only what the force push changed. Okay. Thank you, Larry.
yeah. Or you could use get range diff to see what happened between the force push
hmm
or diff too, but range diff can break it down into multiple commits for you,
And
or
typically,
it'll
how
look
many?
at the diff commits.
Oh, well, I guess you know you mentioned core as a project typically doesn't tend to rely on like the GitHub approving process, but does it still have like a number of approvals required before something gets
No,
merged or no?
not officially. I think some GitHub repositories you can have a bot that like automatically pushes or
Okay,
merges based on approvals. So
okay,
obviously that's not done in Bitcoin Core,
yeah,
but with the like acking system, I guess
hmm
I've never seen anything get merged without at least one ack,
okay,
if that helps.
yeah, yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. All right, cool. We're coming to an end now, so
Mm.
one, appreciate your time and thanks for doing this. Just wanted to bring
Thank
up a couple
you.
of things. Like at the start, or I should say, struggled a bit to like compile and run the Bitcoin daemon locally. So, but if you are interested in seeing me do it successfully, like go back to the last episode where I did it with Raj, where we were working with the BDK and creating a wallet in a BDK wallet backed by a Bitcoin Core node. Where I was able to do it. So I don't know quite what happened today, but such is the nature of live coding. Um, I still hope you managed to get like some value out of this today, and we've shown you some stuff that you can do to kind of start getting involved in the like core review process. Let me stop sharing my screen and go back to something like this. Yeah. Um, yeah, hopefully you did gain some value from it. We're still like very new to this. I'm definitely new to this. I'm learning how to do this whole live streaming, live coding, pair programming stuff. So bear with me, and hopefully we can get this education out to as many people as possible. We'll leave a whole host of this is being recorded and we'll upload it to Bitcoin TV and YouTube and all of those good places. So there'll be a host of resources that you can that we'll put in the description that you can follow up with and continue your learning. Do we want to mention a few of those now, Gloria, or you think we're good to just include them in show
Mention the
notes and
what? Sorry.
like the resources for people to follow up on, or should we kind of just
Oh,
leave them in
yeah.
show notes and people will find them?
Yeah, in the show notes.
Yeah,
PR Review
yeah,
Club is great. Doxygen.
yeah, no problem.
That's what I would.
Did you have any kind of final words for people before I start heading out?
Um, mostly that I think everyone should review Bitcoin Core PRs. If you're a Bitcoiner and you hold some of your wealth in this magic internet money, it's open source, which means you can and you should be looking to make sure that it's secure, and the code changes being proposed are also not going to make it insecure. Um, yeah, that's what everyone should do. And it's like it doesn't take that long to figure out how to do it. Like we got reasonably far today, and what we didn't show was just like, all the fun that you have just digging into the code and like figuring things out. And over time you know how Bitcoin works, which is kind of cool. I
Mm,
think you just like know how it works. So
yeah,
yeah, I
just download
recommend.
the code and start playing around and start
Yeah.
searching and seek and you shall find. What would you say to someone who's just getting started, someone who wants to contribute but is overwhelmed?
Um. Well, I think it's natural to feel overwhelmed, but like anything, you chip away at it slowly and eventually you look back and you see, wow, I know so much more about Bitcoin than I did
Mm,
2 months ago.
yeah,
But there's always like smaller things to start out with, and then you tackle on bigger things later.
awesome. Awesome. All right. So yeah, let's leave it there. If anyone in the chat, if any of the core developers or anyone working on Bitcoin libraries and stuff of that nature fancy doing a stream and helping educate me and the rest of the community, I really appreciate that if you reach out. Yes, we are gonna upload this to YouTube probably tomorrow at some point. We'll have all the show notes and stuff on there. So feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel as well and share this around. And yeah, we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.